The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and regret, but the real stench was the betrayal that hung in the air. By the time Tom Harris woke from his coma, his wife was already signing divorce papers in the next room. 3 months earlier, Tom had been a man who had it all: a loving wife, Sarah, a bright-eyed son, Ethan, and a steady job as a mechanic. He wasn't rich, but he was content, the kind of content that comes from knowing you've built something real. That all changed on a rainy Tuesday night when a drunk driver T-boned his pickup truck, leaving him broken in a ditch and his life in pieces. He spent weeks in a coma, tubes snaking from his body, while Sarah sat by his bedside, or so he thought. The truth was uglier. Within days of the accident, Sarah had packed her bags, taken Ethan, and moved in with Richard Klein, a slick real estate mogul who'd been circling her like a vulture for years. When Tom opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a flickering fluorescent light. The second was his sister, Jenny, her face pale and tight with something she wasn't saying. "Where's Sarah?" he croaked, his throat raw from disuse. Jenny hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "She's gone. Tom, she left you. She's with someone else." The words hit harder than the crash. Sarah hadn't just left. She'd erased him, filing for divorce while he was still unconscious, claiming irreconcilable differences as if his near-death experience was a personality flaw. Tom's recovery was slow, not just because of the shattered ribs and fractured leg, but because of the hole where his family used to be. Ethan, his 12-year-old son, was his anchor. But Sarah had full custody, and Richard's money ensured the best lawyers. Tom got visitation rights every other weekend, like a guest in his own son's life. The first time he saw Ethan after the hospital, the boy ran to him, tears streaming, and hugged him so tight Tom thought his ribs might crack again. "Why didn't you fight for me?" Dad Ethan whispered. Tom had no answer, only guilt. Sarah, meanwhile, was living a life Tom barely recognized. Richard's mansion was all glass and sharp edges, a far cry from their cozy, cluttered home. She wore designer clothes now, her laughter louder, her smile sharper. But Ethan wasn't adjusting. He'd sit silently at Richard's polished dining table, pushing food around his plate, his eyes fixed on the empty chair where Tom used to sit. Sarah noticed but didn't care. "He'll get over it," she'd say, sipping wine, her voice dripping with dismissal. Richard would nod, his hand on her shoulder, his smirk saying he'd won more than just her heart, he'd won the life Tom had built. Tom threw himself into physical therapy, not for himself, but for Ethan. He wanted to be strong enough to be the father his son needed, even if it was only 2 days a month. He rented a tiny apartment above the garage where he worked, the walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' fights, the kind of place where dreams go to die. But he hung Ethan's drawings on the fridge, kept his favorite snacks stocked, and waited for those precious weekends. One Saturday, Ethan showed up with a bruise on his arm. "It's nothing," he muttered, but his eyes said otherwise. Tom's gut twisted. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. Ethan looked away, picking at his sleeve. Richard got mad. "I broke a glass. He grabbed me." Tom's blood ran cold. He wanted to storm Richard's mansion, to break more than a glass, but he knew that would only make things worse. Instead, he held Ethan close, promising to fix it, even if he didn't know how. He started digging. Richard Klein wasn't just a rich guy with a charming smile. He had a history. A quick search helped by Jenny, who knew her way around public records, revealed a string of lawsuits, domestic disputes, shady business deals, even a restraining order from an ex. Tom's lawyer, a scrappy pro bono guy named Mike, warned him it wouldn't be easy. "You're up against money. Tom, money buys judges, witnesses, the whole damn system." But Tom wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Ethan. The custody hearing was a battlefield. Sarah sat beside Richard, her face a mask of indignation, as if Tom was the one who'd betrayed her. "He's a broken man," her lawyer argued, pointing to Tom's cane, his limp, his modest income. He can't provide stability. Tom's heart sank, but Mike fought back, presenting Ethan's testimony, carefully coached to avoid sounding rehearsed about the bruise, about Richard's temper, about the nights he heard his mother crying behind closed doors. The judge, a stern woman with tired eyes, listened but reserved judgment. "This isn't about who's the better parent," she said. "It's about what's best for the child." Weeks passed, and Tom's hope flickered like a dying bulb. He kept working, kept fighting, kept showing up for Ethan. But Sarah wasn't done. She dared to push further, filing a motion to terminate Tom's visitation rights entirely, claiming he was unstable and a danger to Ethan. The accusation hit like a punch. Tom had never raised a hand to his son, never raised his voice. He'd been the one to teach Ethan how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, how to laugh through tears. And now Sarah was trying to erase him completely. The night before the final hearing, Tom sat in his apartment, staring at a photo of him, Sarah, and Ethan at the beach, back when life made sense. He wondered where he'd gone wrong. Had he loved her too much? Not enough? He didn't sleep. Instead, he wrote a letter to the judge, pouring out his heart not for pity, but for Ethan. He wrote about the accident, the betrayal, the love that kept him going. He didn't know if she'd read it, but it was all he had left. The courtroom was packed the next day. Sarah sat ramrod straight, Richard's arm around her, his face smug as ever. Ethan was there too, looking small in the oversized chair, his eyes darting between his parents. Tom's lawyer presented the letter, and to Tom's surprise, the judge read it silently, her expression unreadable. Then she called Ethan to speak. The boy's voice trembled, but grew stronger with every word. "I love my mom," he said, "but I need my dad. He's the one who makes me feel safe." The room went quiet. Sarah's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with something like shame. Richard's smirk faded. The judge didn't rule immediately, but her questions to Sarah were sharp, probing her motives, her quick remarriage, her dismissal of Ethan's feelings. Tom watched, barely breathing, as the woman who'd once promised to love him forever unraveled under scrutiny. Days later, the ruling came. Tom was granted joint custody. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Ethan would spend half his time with him, in that tiny apartment that suddenly felt like a palace. Sarah didn't fight it. Maybe she couldn't. Not after Ethan's words. Richard, predictably, distanced himself, his interest in Sarah waning as her legal bills piled up. Tom and Ethan rebuilt their life, one small moment at a time. They played catch in the park, fixed cars together in the garage, laughed over burnt dinners, the scars, Tom's physical ones. Ethan's emotional ones didn't vanish, but they faded. Tom never spoke ill of Sarah, not even when Ethan asked why she'd left. "Sometimes people lose their way," he'd say, and leave it at that. But the story didn't end neatly. Sarah showed up one day, unannounced, her eyes red from crying. She wanted to talk, to explain, to make amends. Tom let her in, not for her, but for Ethan. She spoke of regret, of pressure from Richard, of choices she couldn't undo. Tom listened, his heart heavy but no longer breaking. He didn't forgive her, not fully, but he didn't hate her either. For Ethan's sake, he'd try to coexist. The real question lingered, not just for Tom, but for everyone who heard their story. Was Sarah's betrayal a moment of weakness or a calculated choice? Was Tom's fight for Ethan justice or vengeance? And what does it mean to love someone when trust is gone? Share your thoughts, what's right, what's wrong, and where does forgiveness fit in a world of broken promises?